Witch Trials of Scotland: Fear, Faith and Persecution. Scotland is a land renowned for its rich tapestry of myths and legends, deeply intertwined with its history and natural landscape. The land's dramatic scenery, from its mist-shrouded highlands to its ancient castles, serves as the perfect backdrop for these stories of magic, mystery and adventures. Whether passed down through oral tradition or immortalised in literature, these myths continue to shape Scotland's cultural identity and captivating locals and visitors alike. There are plenty of tales of witches, which have long been associated with supernatural powers and magic, with varying perceptions across different cultures and times. Witches were sometimes seen as healers or spiritual figures, which would have been much needed people in some of the remote parts of Scotland. During the Middle Ages, the rise of Christianity linked witchcraft to heresy and devil worship, leading to a growing suspicion, particularly of women who were healers, midwives, or lived on the fringes of society. The fear of witches reached its height during the European witch hunts of the 15th to the 18th centuries, where tens of thousands of people, mostly women, were accused and tortured and executed. The witch trials in Scotland were some of the most intense and widespread in Europe, reflecting on a potent combination of religion, political upheaval, and deep-seated superstition. Between the 16th and early 18th century, Scotland saw thousands of accusations, and an estimated 2/3 of the accused were executed. Witchcraft was perceived not only as a crime against individual, but as a grave threat to community. Witches believed to consort with the devil, using supernatural powers to harm others or influence events. This fear was heightened by social anxieties, including poor harvests, disease, and the political turbulence that characterized the era. Accusations of witchcraft often provided a convenient scapegoat for unexplained misfortunes or personal grievances. In 1563, the Scottish Parliament passed the Witchcraft Act, which made the practice of witchcraft punishable by death. King James VI of Scotland, who would later become James I of England, played a pivotal role in the early phases of the Scottish witch trials. His personal experiences and strong belief in witchcraft intensified the fear of witches across the nation. One of the most infamous events during his reign was the North Berwick witch trials, 1590 to 1592. These trials were prompted by accusations that a group of witches had attempted to kill James by summoning storms to prevent his return to Scotland from Denmark, where he had married Princess Anne. The trial resulted in torture and the execution of many. One such person was Agnes Sampson, known as the Wise Wife of Keith, who was a healer and a midwife. She was accused of using magic to conjure storms to endanger the king's ship. Sampson was tortured and eventually confessed under duress. Her execution, along with many during the North Berwick trials, marks one of the most notorious witch hunts in Scotland. King James' obsession with witchcraft led him to write Demonology in 1597, in which he outlined his beliefs about witches and provided guidelines for the identification and punishment. His endorsement of witch hunts had a chilling effect of Scotland, encouraging further trials and brutal methods. The Scottish witch trials occurred in waves, with 5 major hunts taking place between the late 16th and late 17th century. The first major wave, known as the Great Scottish Witch Hunt of 1597, followed shortly after the North Berwick trials. It resulted in hundreds of accusations across the country, with many suspects subjected to torture, which often led to false confessions. Scotland's legal system allowed the use of torture to extract confessions, just like many other places during this time. These witch hunts targeted people, mainly women, often those living on the fringes of society's widows, the elderly, or women with a knowledge of folk medicine. The final significant wave of trials in the 1690s marked the last major witch hunt in Scotland. Here are some of the most famous witches in Scotland history. Isabel Gowdie is one of the most well-known witches in Scotland due to her detailed confession in 1662, during a witch trial in which her confession, unlike many others, were voluntary and highly detailed, describing her involvement in a coven, shape-shifting into animals, and interacting with the fairy realm. Her vivid accounts of witchcraft, including chants and rituals, provide a rare insight in the folk belief of that time. Her story has been the subject of much study, including works by modern historians and writers. Janet Horne was the last person executed for witchcraft in Scotland. She lived within the Highlands, and her daughter were accused of witchcraft after the daughter developed a deformity of her hands and feet, leading to villagers to suspect that Janet had used the magic to transform her daughter into a pony to take her to the devil. Janet Horne's execution happened in 1727 and marks the end of the witch trials in Scotland. Her tragic story highlights the brutality of the witch hunts. And the last story is of Bessie Dunlop, who was a healer and soothsayer who claimed to have been visited by the spirits of a dead man named Thomas Reid, a former soldier. She is said to have gained her healing and her fortune-telling abilities through her communications with him. Dunlop's case is significant because it involves no allegations of harm. Her ability as a healer and her claims of spiritual contact were enough to get her convicted of witchcraft. She was burnt at the stake in 1576. We cannot finish without mentioning Helen Duncan, although not from the witch hunt era. Helen Duncan is often considered one of Scotland's modern witches, a spiritual medium who was accused of being a witch during World War II. In 1944, she was tried under the Witchcraft Act of 1735 and was sentenced to 9 months' imprisonment. Helen was the last person to be prosecuted under this law. Her case attracted attention due to her supposed abilities to conjure spirits of dead sailors from sunken ships during seances, which alarmed the governments. Her trial marked the end of the legal witchcraft prosecutions in Britain. witch trials were conducted with brutal methods. Suspected witches were subjected to pricking, where sharp objects were used to test for spots on the body, thought to be marks of the devil. Another common form of torture was waking, in which subjects were deprived of sleep for days, often until they confessed to witchcraft. The confessions extracted under torture was used as evidence to convict and execute the accused, typically by hanging or burning at the stake. By the early 18th century, skepticism about the witch hunts began to grow. The intellectual currents of the Enlightenment, which emphasized reason and scientific inquiry, clashed with the irrational fear of witchcraft. As a result, belief in witches and supernatural forces began to decline, leading to fewer accusations and a greater reluctance to persecute suspected witchcraft. While belief in witchcraft persisted in some rural areas, the era of the mass trials and executions were over. The witch hunts left a profound legacy, shaping Scotland's history and culture for generations. It is estimated that around 3,000 people were executed, although it is likely to be more than that, for some records have been lost. So we may never know the correct figure, but with the estimated figure of around 3,000 makes it one of the most deadly witch-hunting countries in Europe relative to its population size. Then in 2020 and 2021, many centuries after the repeal of the Witchcraft Act and after a 2-year campaign by the Witches of Scotland group, a members' bill in the Scottish Parliament, with the support of the Scottish administration, to clear the names of those accused. On the International Women's Day of 2022, the First Minister officially apologised on behalf of all the Scottish governments to those accused under the Witchcraft Act. Throughout Scotland there are some memorials to these witches, and here are a few I had a chance to visit while I was in Scotland. Kirkwall on Orkney. The trials were held in the St Magnus Cathedral. The Witchcraft Memorial was unveiled in 2019 and is placed in the old execution sites. Under the memorial is a time capsule which contained artwork made by people of Orkney in memory of the fellow islanders who were executed for witchcraft. There are no names or even the total number of people executed, as it seems records were lost. Like Kirkwall, Dundee, it is unsure how many people were accused and later sentenced to death for being a witch. We do know that the last person to be executed for being a witch in Dundee was Grizzel Jeffrey, who was executed for being a witch in 1669. There are two mosaics, one represents water and the other represents fire, that allegedly marks the spot of her death. You could easily walk past them and not know who or what they are for. There is also a blue plaque with her name, but no mention as to why. I hope upon seeing these, people will in fact look her up. There is also a marker at the Hoff graveyard in Dundee, which has come to be known as the Witch's Stone, where Geoffrey is supposedly buried. However, it is unlikely that an alleged witch would have been buried on consecrated ground. The local legend is that leaving her an offering can bring good luck, and the marker can be frequently found with coins, ribbons and other simple offerings placed upon it. The stone is likely to be a marker, a place where the 9 trades of Dundee used to meet to conduct business. In Edinburgh there is another memorial which is easily missed by so many. The memorial drinking fountain is attached to a wall at the lower end of the castle esplanade below Edinburgh Castle, and it is close to where many witches were burnt at the stake. The well was commissioned by Sir Patrick Geddes in 1894 and designed by his friend John Duncan. These are just the ones that I had seen whilst visiting Scotland, but there are more, and I will put a link in the description for those who wish to look out for them. The witch trials were a tragic result in religious zeal, political instability and social fears, and local superstitions, which created a climate of fear that led to the persecution and executions of thousands of innocent people, mostly women. The witch hunts offer a grim reminder of the dangers of scapegoating and the consequences of allowing fear and superstition to override reason and justice. While the trials ended centuries ago, their legacy continues to resonate, serving as a stark example of the dark aspects of human history and the need for critical thinking and compassion in times of uncertainty. We know that Scotland is reckoning with its past, offering both apologies and memorials for those who suffered under these witch trials. Through these acts of remembrance, Scotland seeks to honour the memory of the victims and ensures that such tragedies will never be repeated. Let's follow Scotland's lead and remember those who lost their lives during the witch trials, honouring their memory as individuals who were wrongly accused and persecuted. By acknowledging their stories, we pay tribute to the innocent lives taken and reflect on the tragedy of a time when fear and superstition overpowered reason and humanity. These memorials and apologies stand as lasting symbols of respect, ensuring that those who suffered are not forgotten, and their experiences are preserved in the collective memory of generations to come. Thank you so much for watching and supporting my channel. I truly appreciate every single one of you. Whether you're a viewer, subscriber, Patreon supporter or channel member, your continued encouragement and generosity means the world to me and allows me to keep creating content we are all passionate about. I couldn't do this without you, and I am so grateful to have such an amazing community. Thank you for being part of this journey. Until the next time, stay safe.